England, Scotland, Wales. 3 countries, 1 island, and hidden inside it, 18 villages that have no right to still exist. We're talking about places where the road simply ends and the silence begins, where the monks were slaughtered for ringing a bell, where a gambler fell asleep in church and the devil flew in through the roof, where an entire clan was murdered in their beds by the guests they had been feeding for 2 weeks, where the mines are finally quiet, except the ground beneath them is still slowly poisoning everything. Some of these places have hundreds of years of documented darkness. Others have legends so specific, so persistent, they're harder to dismiss than the history books. Hit subscribe, because after this video, no countryside drive will ever look quite the same again. Number 18, Blanchland, Northumberland. There's a village in Northumberland built on the bones of a monastery, and the monks who died here may have caused it themselves. Blanchland was founded in 1165 by Premonstratensian monks who wore white robes. According to local legend, a Scottish raiding party lost its way in moorland fog and turned back until the monks rang a bell to celebrate their escape. The sound guided the Scots straight to the gates. They broke through, killed the monks, and burned the buildings. The village today was built from the abbey's ruins in the 18th century. Population at the 2011 census, 135. The Lord Crewe Arms, built from the old abbot's lodging, is said to be haunted by Dorothy Forster, who hid her Jacobite brother from government forces in 1715, staged a fake funeral for him, and is said to wait here forever for his return. Number 17, Muker, North Yorkshire. There's a village in Swaledale so far into the Yorkshire Dales that the road narrows to a single track and the signal disappears. Muker sits at 280 metres above sea level, ringed by limestone walls and open fell, population under 200. The name comes from Old Norse, Imur Akear, meaning narrow field. Vikings settled first, then lead miners. By the 18th century, Muker was a working community built entirely around lead extraction from the surrounding hills. When the lead ran out in the 19th century, most left. The Church of St. Mary the Virgin dates to 1580. For centuries, it was the only church serving the entire Upper Dale, which meant coffins were carried by hand across miles of open moor, through all weather, to reach the only consecrated burial ground. The old coffin road is still walkable. On a wet November morning, you'll wish it wasn't. Number 16, Kettlewell, North Yorkshire. There's a village in Wharfdale that used to rely on lead. Now it relies on tourists who arrive, take photographs, and leave before dark, usually without knowing what they're standing on. Kettlewell sits enclosed by limestone fells that turn the lights strange in late afternoon. The name comes from Old Norse, kettle, a cauldron. The valley holds sound oddly. Lead was mined in the surrounding hills from at least the medieval period through the 19th century. The industry inflated the population, then collapsed and vanished, leaving behind shafts, spoil heaps, and hollow ground beneath the village. St. Mary's Church dates to the 12th century. In the churchyard, some graves predate any written record of the village's name. The Black Death reached Upper Wharfdale and reduced settlements here to fractions of their former populations. The survivors rebuilt on the same ground. People here have always rebuilt on the same ground. Number 15, Dent, Cumbria. There's a village in Cumbria that sits within the Yorkshire Dales National Park while being administered by Cumbria, a jurisdictional oddity that mirrors the place itself. Dent belongs to no category easily. Population around 700. Nearest town 8 miles away on a road that closes in winter. Adam Sedgwick, the father of modern geology, was born here in 1785. A granite fountain in the village centre commemorates him. The irony is that the rock beneath Dent is limestone and shale, unstable, porous, prone to subsidence and sinkhole. The Dent Fault runs directly through the valley. It is one of the most significant geological fault lines in northern England, separating ancient Lake District rocks from the Pennine Limestone to the east. The ground beneath this village has been moving for 400 million years. It will still be moving long after the last house has settled into it. Number 14, Goathland, North Yorkshire. There's a village on the North York moors that looks charming from every angle. The steam railway, the black-faced sheep on the green, the waterfall through the woods. Goathland has a darker layer beneath. The village dates to at least 1109, when Henry I granted land here for a hermitage. By the 1600s, it was considered the most witch-haunted settlement in North Yorkshire, with families documented as practitioners of magic. According to local legend, a young woman named Githa was bricked alive inside a hilltop castle by a pagan lord who believed a walled virgin would make his structure stand forever. Her spirit, the Gitrash, is said to appear on the moors as a white dog. Population today, around 438. The moors surrounding the village stretch for 544 uninterrupted square miles. When the heather dies back in winter, those moors look exactly like somewhere a legend would have started. Number 13, Widecombe-in-the-Moor, Devon. There's a village in Dartmoor where the devil is known to have visited, and the physical evidence is still on the floor of the church. On the 21st of October, 1638, a violent storm struck St. Pancras Church during an afternoon service. Ball lightning, one of the earliest documented instances in British history, tore through a window, ripped open the roof, and sent a church tower pinnacle crashing into the nave. 4 people were killed, around 60 were injured. 2 of the dead are buried beneath the floor where they fell. According to local legend, the devil had stopped at a nearby inn before riding to the church, tied his horse to the pinnacle, seized a sleeping gambler named Jan Reynolds from the pews, and rode off, breaking the pinnacle loose. The 120-foot granite tower still stands. The congregation of 300 that afternoon had nowhere to run. Number 12, Glencoe, Highlands. There's a valley in the Scottish Highlands where the geology looks like something went wrong here. The Three Sisters, 3 vast flanking ridges, a dark volcanic basalt that absorbs light. The valley is narrow, sound echoes. The National Trust describes the silence as loaded. What happened on the 13th of February 1692 is still taught in Scottish schools. Around 120 government soldiers arrived in Glencoe in late January, quartered as guests with the MacDonald clan. For nearly 2 weeks, they were fed and sheltered. Then, at 5 a.m., they received orders to kill every MacDonald under the age of 70. 38 were killed outright by soldiers they had fed and housed. Dozens more fled barefoot into the mountains in a blizzard and perished in the cold. The pretext was bureaucratic. The MacDonald chief had signed the oath of allegiance 6 days late. The method was betrayal of hospitality. In Highland culture, the gravest possible sin. Number 11, Ballachulish, Highlands. There's a village at the southern end of Glencoe's valley that carries its own history. Darker in some ways because it is smaller and easier to forget. Ballachulish sits at the mouth of Loch Leven. For 250 years, from the early 18th century, it was one of the largest slate quarrying communities in Scotland, employing hundreds. The quarries closed in 1955. The population shrank and never recovered. Before the bridge opened in 1975, crossing the loch required a ferry. Before that, there was no crossing at all. On the north side of the loch, close to the road, stands a small cairn. It marks where James of the Glen was hanged in 1752 for a murder he almost certainly did not commit. He was left in an iron cage for years as a warning. Robert Louis Stevenson later based part of Kidnapped on the case. Number 10, Plockton, Highlands. There's a village on the west coast of Scotland that looks like it was placed by a film set designer. And that is precisely why it has been used as one. Plockton sits on a sheltered sea loch in Wester Ross, accessible by a single-track road. The Gulf Stream keeps the climate mild enough for palm trees on the shoreline. Population, around 350. The BBC series Hamish Macbeth was filmed almost entirely in Plockton throughout the 1990s. Visitors still arrive expecting the fictional village. What they find is a community established in the early 1800s, when the landlord cleared the surrounding hills of farming families during the Highland clearances and resettled them here as fishermen. The people had no choice. The hills above Plockton, emptied of their communities 2 centuries ago, are still empty. Nobody replanted them with people after the sheep were done. Number 9, Applecross, Highlands. There's a village on the west coast of Scotland that, until 1975, could only be reached by one of the most dangerous roads in the United Kingdom. The Bealach-na-Ba, Pass of the Cattle, climbs from sea level to 626 meters over 9 kilometers of single-track road, with hairpin bends at 20% gradient. Signs warn learner drivers, caravans, and large vehicles not to attempt it. In winter, snow gates close the road for weeks. Applecross was founded in 672 AD by the monk Saint Mael-Ruba on Pictish territory. For over 1,000 years, it remained effectively an island, connected to the mainland only by sea or by a pass that killed horses. When the coastal road finally opened in 1975, most of the population had already left. The surrounding district is still known in Gaelic as a Cwmystwyth, the sanctuary. The pass warns you. Few read the sign carefully enough. Number 8. Kinlochbervie, Highlands. There's a fishing village at the far northwestern edge of Scotland that exists largely because of a decision made in Edinburgh, with nothing to do with the people living there. Kinlochbervie sits on Loch Inchard in Sutherland, population around 400. It is one of the most remote communities on the British mainland, accessible by a single road through 40 miles of empty moor. The nearest town is an hour's drive away. The harbour expanded in the 1980s, briefly making Kinlochbervie one of the top whitefish landing ports in Scotland. That industry has since declined sharply. The landscape here is Louisian gneiss, some of the oldest rock on Earth, at nearly 3 billion years. The hills are bare and rounded, stripped of soil by glacier. There are no trees, there is almost no cover. On overcast days, the light is grey in every direction and the moors appear to have no end. Number 7. Durness, Highlands. There's a village at the northwestern tip of Scotland where the road simply stops. Durness is the most northwesterly settlement of any size on the British mainland, population around 350. The nearest community is over 20 miles east. On clear days, you can see the Orkney Islands. On most days in winter, you cannot see much at all. Below the village sits Smoo Cave, a vast sea cave complex formed by both sea and underground rivers. The largest chamber is 60 meters wide and 15 meters high. It has been used by humans since the Mesolithic period. According to local legend, it was once the lair of a wizard who disposed of his enemies in the underground waters. John Lennon spent childhood summers near Durness. He later described them as formative. There is a garden in the village dedicated to his memory. In February, it is covered in snow and there is nobody here. Number 6. Betws-y-Coed, Wales. There's a village in Snowdonia that has served as the gateway to the mountains since the Victorian era, and which before the tourists arrived was known for something quieter and older. Betws-y-Coed sits at the confluence of 4 rivers. The name translates as Prayer House in the Wood. The Church of St. Michael and All Angels is built on a site of Christian worship dating to the 6th century. Some graves in the churchyard predate any readable inscription. During the 19th century, the village became a famous artistic colony. The painter David Cox visited repeatedly, making the area internationally known. The railway arrived, and with it, mass tourism. What visitors don't always notice, the village sits in a valley completely enclosed by forest and mountain. In winter, when daylight lasts 7 hours and the forest closes the sky, it has the quality of a place sealed shut. The rivers rise fast here, without warning. Number 5. Beddgelert, Wales. There's a village in the heart of Snowdonia that built its entire identity around a story that may be a fabrication. Beddgelert means Gelert's grave in Welsh. The legend holds that a prince named Llywelyn returned from hunting to find his hound covered in blood. He killed the dog, then found his baby alive beside a wolf the dog had killed to protect the child. The Grave of Remorse is a tourist attraction today. Most historians believe the story was invented in the late 18th century by an innkeeper to attract visitors. Beddgelert sits at the confluence of 2 rivers beneath the slopes of Snowdon, population around 500. The Snowdon Massif rises directly above the village to 1,085 meters. When cloud sits low on the mountain, which it does for much of the year, the valley grows dark by early afternoon and the air carries the cold of the high ground. Number 4. Llanberis, Wales. There's a village at the base of Snowdon that lives entirely in the shadow of the mountain above it. Llanberis sits at the foot of the Llanberis Pass on the edge of Llanthony, population around 2,000. It is the main departure point for the Snowdon Mountain Railway and the most popular walking routes to the summit. Thousands pass through each year without looking at what they're passing through. What surrounds Llanberis is the remnant of one of the most intensive slate quarrying operations in the world. The Dynawig Quarry, closed in 1969, left terraced slate waste so vast it defines the local skyline. At its peak, it employed over 3,000 men. The accident records from those years are long. The villages of the pass lost generation after generation of men to the mountain long before it was ever climbed for pleasure. The National Slate Museum now occupies the old quarry workshops. Number 3. Aberdaron, Wales. There's a village at the very end of Wales. Aberdaron sits at the tip of the Llyn Peninsula. There is nothing beyond it but water and then island, 52 miles away. The road ends here. Population around 1,000. In the medieval period, Aberdaron was the final stopping point for pilgrims crossing to Bardsey Island, Innis Enlli, where legend holds that 20,000 saints are buried and where 3 pilgrimages equaled one to Rome. The 12th century church of St. Hywyn still stands above the beach. Boats have been lost on the crossing for centuries. The poet R.S. Thomas served as vicar here from 1967 to 1978. He described the landscape as both transcendent and oppressive. He stayed 11 years, standing on the beach at Aberdaron with wind off the Irish Sea and nothing visible on the horizon. You understand why medieval pilgrims believed they needed a saint's help to make the crossing. Number 2. Cwmystwyth, Wales. There's a valley in mid-Wales that has been mined continuously since the Bronze Age. What it looks like now is the result. Cwmystwyth sits in the Upper Ystwyth Valley in Ceredigion. The Ordnance Survey identifies it as the geographical centre of Wales. Population today, a few dozen. The valley is defined by ruins of lead, zinc, and silver mines that operated from the Bronze Age until 1950. In 2002, archaeologists found the Bank Tyndall sun disk here, a gold object over 4,000 years old, the oldest gold artifact ever found in Wales. Mining contaminated the River Ystwyth so severely that by 1919, the water supported only 9 species, mostly insects. No fish returned to the stretch below the workings until the 1970s. The spoil heaps remain. Lead concentrations in the soil are still elevated. Walk the valley and you walk through layers of human ambition, each one abandoned, each one slowly dissolving into the hillside. Number 1. Llanthony, Monmouthshire. There's a valley in the Black Mountains that a 12th century chronicler described as fixed amongst a barbarous people. He was describing the monks trying to survive. Llanthony Priory was founded around 1100 by a Norman knight who found a ruined chapel here for hunting and decided to stay and pray. By 1118, he had 40 cannons. By 1135, Welsh attacks had driven them to Gloucester. They rebuilt. Owain Glyndwr attacked in the 15th century. By 1538, only 4 cannons remained. The building sold for £160 and collapsed. The Vale of Iwias is still accessible only via the Gospel Pass. In winter, it closes. There is no phone signal in the valley. The ruins are said to be haunted by a monk who wanders the arches after dark. Some valleys do something to the people who enter them. This one has been doing it for 1,000 years. Subscribe. The next video goes somewhere you'll recognize and wish you didn't.